Wel, bore da. Croeso mawr I chi gyd a diolch unwaith eto I chi am ymuno â ni bore yma. So this is the third press conference the leader of Plaid Cymru, Adam Price, and I have held under the auspices of the cooperation agreement, a year since the Welsh Government and Plaid Cymru signed that agreement, an agreement made here in Wales to work together on a series of shared priorities and commitments where we believe that that cooperation can make a difference. And the importance of that cooperation has only grown as the cost of living crisis has intensified. Today we're publishing the first annual report, and here it is, as you've all got a copy of it. And the report looks at what we have achieved through the cooperation agreement over the last 12 months. And for us, therefore, today is a chance to reflect on some of those achievements and to look back at the first year of the agreement. The agreement itself was signed against a challenging backdrop. We were still in the emergency phase of the pandemic. We were dealing then, as we deal now, with the long-term impact of Brexit, the climate emergency, and with a UK government determined to turn the clock back on devolution. And a year on, in many respects, these challenges remain, but now with new ones added. The pandemic may not be over, but we move beyond the emergency response and are learning how to live with the virus and with its continuing impact. Russia's unprovoked attack on Ukraine continues, but I'm thankful that we have been able to offer so many people sanctuary and security here in Wales. The cost of living crisis continues to deepen. Energy prices and inflation both rising rapidly. And the UK is now in recession and our economy struggling, the result of the chaotic and failed policies of successive UK governments. And unfortunately, it is people in Wales who will pay the price for the UK government's many failures. But despite those difficult times, we have remained committed to the cooperation agreement. We signed the agreement in a spirit of collaboration, making a commitment to work together on areas where we agree and where, by working together, we can make a difference to people who live here in Wales. And that is what we have lived out during this first year. We focused on those commitments which will help support people during the cost of living crisis, policies and proposals that reach into the lives of people every day. And our annual report highlights what we have been able to achieve across a range of its areas. And those include taking the first steps to expand funded high-quality childcare to all 2-year-olds in Wales, introducing a new package of measures to ensure that we have vibrant communities that people can afford to live in, and which address high numbers of second homes concentrated in some communities here in Wales. And we've set out our proposals for a sustainable farming scheme, including details of the transition period and stability payments for farmers. I'll hand over to Adam now, who will say more about the progress during the first year of the cooperation agreement.
Diolch yn fawr, Prif Weinidog. Fel dywedodd Mark, mae'r cytundeb yn dangos ffordd newydd o weithio ar draws ffiniau gwleidyddol, gan ddangos fod ffordd mwy gydweithredol a chadarnhaol un ffordd ni o weithio yng Nghymru o'i chymharu gyda'r anrefn ac annibenndod rydyn ni wedi gweld gan Llywodraeth San Steffan oedd y Prif Weinidog wedi cyfeirio ato fe dros y flwyddyn diwetha. 12 months ago to this day, when we held our first press conference on the steps of our Senedd on a bright December morning, as I recall, I said that that agreement marked the beginning of a new way of doing politics, one that is cooperative, inclusive, forward-looking and respectful. By working together over the past 12 months, cooperating and delivering, but also scrutinizing and challenging each other where necessary, we're making a real difference, delivering progressive and radical policies for our nation. Together, an additional 45,000 children were offered a free school lunch upon starting school this September as part of our commitment to deliver universal free school meals for all primary school children by the end of 2024. We've agreed a way forward on Senedd reform, paving the way for a more effective, more representative Senedd, equal in gender, elected by a fully PR-based system. We've supported the work of the Independent Commission on the Constitutional Future of Wales, and we'll be receiving its interim report later this month. Gyda'n gilydd, rydyn ni wedi cyhoeddi newidiadau arfaethedig i'r cod datganiadau o'r hyn sy'n bwysig, statudol, i gynnwys addysgu hanes Cymru yn ei holl amrywiaeth yn ddi-amwys fel rhan o'r cwricwlwm newydd. Byddwn ni hefyd yn comisiynu llinell amser o brif ddigwyddiadau hanes Cymru. Rydyn ni hefyd wedi coeddi raglen o wersi Cymraeg am ddim i bobl ifanc rhwng 16 a 25 mlwydd oed fel rhan o'n ymdrechion i gyrraedd miliwn o siaradwyr Cymraeg. Ar y cyd, rydyn ni wedi sefydlu panel arbenigol i archwilio sefydlu awdurdod darlledu a chyfathrebu cysgodol fel rhan o'n ymdrechion i gryfhau democratiaeth, i gair diffyg gwybodaeth a gwneud y cyfryngen fwy pluralaidd yma yng Nghymru. Mae cyllid gwerth 11 miliwn wedi gyhoeddi dros y 2 mlynedd nesaf ar gyfer raglen Arfor 2, raglen i hybu ffyniant economaidd a'r iaith Gymraeg. Dyma ymrwymiadau eang ac uchelgeision sydd yn gwneud gwahaniaeth draws Cymru ym mhob cymuned. Rwy'n edrych ymlaen at rannu mwy o gyhoeddiadau ar ein hymrwymiadau wrth i ni barhau i gydweithio ar y cytundeb. We have a positive, constructive relationship. And as you can see from what we've been able to achieve in the first year of the agreement in a challenging and difficult context, as the First Minister said, we are working well together, positively and constructively for the people of Wales. To finish, it only feels right as we mark and reflect on a year of working together that we say a huge, heartfelt and sincere diolch yn fawr to our national football team who, along with y Wal Goch, have shown us all on the world stage what it truly means as a nation to be together stronger. Diolch yn fawr iawn I chi.
Well, thank you, Adam. I think that's a great note to end on. The Welsh Government continues to be committed to working alongside and with Plaid Cymru over the next 2 years on the areas where we have common ground and as we have set out in the agreement. Diolch yn fawr I chi gyd. We'll now take questions. There are a number of our journalist colleagues here in the room and some on the screen, and we'll alternate a bit between the two. But first of all, this morning we're going to Felicity Evans of BBC Wales.
Diolch, thank you. This is to both of you, please, and if you could answer bilingually to both my questions, I'd be grateful. Thank you. You've talked about the budgetary pressures, and certainly Welsh Government ministers have repeatedly talked about the chunk that inflation is taking out of the Welsh Government's budget. Given that, what are the implications for the commitments in the cooperation agreement? Will you have to row back on some of those, or has it been ring-fenced?
Well, the commitment we have in the agreement is that we fund the items that are in it, and we've agreed the budget for those items, and those budgets are preserved during the budget-making process. They're discussed between us, but we are committed to making sure that we continue agreed ways forward to make sure that those items have the budgets that they need. That is challenging because the quantum as a whole is shrinking. But that's the path that we set out on together, and we remain committed to delivering on that. Wel, mae yn anoddach achos y cyllid sydd 'da ni yn cwmpo bron bob dydd, ond yr uchelgais sydd tu ôl y cytundeb, dydy hwnna ddim wedi newid. A ni'n cytuno dy gilydd am y cyllid sydd ar gael I delifro ar popeth sydd yn y cytundeb, a dydy hwnna ddim wedi newid hefyd.
Yes, the agreement is a 3-year agreement, and we, as part of that, already agreed in detail the financial provisions that were necessary in order to meet those commitments, and so that is maintained even as the context has changed. Obviously. Through the Finance Committee, which is part of the mechanisms of the cooperation agreement, we endeavour to work with the Welsh Government flexibly in order to see how best we can jointly help in responding to the cost of living crisis, the pressures on public services, and where flexibility is possible, then obviously we're keen to facilitate that. But the commitments remain the commitments. They've gone through the democratic structures of our party, and indeed many of them are so relevant given the cost of living pressures that many of our citizens, many of our families are facing, thinking about the commitment to free school meals, for example, the expansion of childcare, the problem of affordability and housing in crisis. They were important issues already, but they're even more important now in the context that we're dealing with. Mae'r cytundeb yn gytundeb tair mlynedd ac fel rhan o'r cytundeb mi oeddwn ni eisoes wedi adnabod y cyllid oedd angen I glusnodi ar gyfer delifro ar yr ymrwymiadau hynny, ac mae hynny yn aros. Wrth gwrs, dyn ni trwy mecanweithiau y cytundeb a pwyllgor cyllidol, lle dyn ni yn trafod materion cyllidol yn reolaidd, ac lle mae yn bosib I edrych yn hyblyg, wrth gwrs, I gynnwrthwyo Llywodraeth Cymru I ymateb i'r pwysau ychwanegol sydd ar wasanaethau cyhoeddus ac ar bobl yng Nghymru. Dyn ni bob amser yn barod I gael y sgwrs hynny ac I helpu mewn unrhyw ffordd y gallen ni. Ond mae'r ymrwymiadau yn aros, ac wrth gwrs maen nhw wedi mynd trwy strwythurau democrataidd y ddwy blaid, a mae llawer iawn ohonyn nhw hyd yn oed yn fwy perthnasol heddiw nag oedden nhw gynt o ran y pwysau sydd ar gymaint o deuluoedd pan ni'n meddwl am yr ymrwymiad o ran ymestyn prydau ysgol am ddim, gofal am ddim I rai dyflwydd a hefyd y crisis fforddadwyedd o fewn y sector tai, felly I ni yn ymrwymiedig I ddilifro arnyn nhw, ond I gydweithio lle gallwn ni hefyd wrth gwrs I ymateb i'r crisis dyn ni wynebu.
Diolch. And for Mr Price, you've talked about this agreement bringing in a new era of respectful politics, but Plaid Cymru is currently facing allegations of a toxic culture. One of your own MSs, speaking on BBC Wales Live last night, said that she had expressed her own concerns to the process that's been set up to look at that and encouraged others to do the same. And she chose her words very carefully when she was asked if she had confidence in the way that the leadership was handling all of this. If there is a toxic culture in Plaid Cymru, is that not the responsibility of you as leader? And to Mr Drakeford, to what extent is all of this casting a shadow over the deal that you've done with Plaid Cymru and the cooperation agreement?
Though this is a press conference, as you will appreciate, Felicity, which is on the cooperation agreement, and we want to focus our attention here on the policies which are making such a difference to the lives of the people of Wales that we jointly represent. I did anticipate that these matters would be raised this morning. So I want to say this. First of all, I want to emphasise that the well-being of all of our staff and all of our members is of the highest importance to us as a party and to me as leader. We've acted quickly in response to the media reports and have offered all of our staff appropriate support and various fora, a range of fora in which they can share their experiences confidentially. We want the party, we're committed to the party embodying the best values. And if this exercise demonstrates things we need to improve, or to address, then we will not hesitate in doing so. As I've previously said, and for reasons that you'll understand, I can't comment on any ongoing process at this stage. I'm quite rightly not privy to them. But the party takes all allegations seriously, as do I. As a party, we operate on the basis that if and when there is evidence of wrongdoing following the outcome of any process, the party will deal appropriately with the issues and do so in line with its disciplinary procedures. There will come a time when I can address these matters more fully, but that's all that I'm able to say at this point for the reasons that I've already explained. Ie, yn naturiol, fel byddwch chi'n deall, mae hwn yn gynadledd sydd yn ffocysu ar cytundeb cydweithio, a lle dyn ni'n, wrth gwrs, yn canolbwyntio ar y polisïau sy'n gwneud cymryd y waniaeth i bobl Cymru, ond o'n i wedi rhagweld falle bydd y materion yma yn cael eu codi. Felly mae yna rai pethau dwi eisiau gweud y bore yma i chi gyd. Yn y lle cyntaf, wi eisiau pwysleisio bod llesiant ein holl staff, a'n holl aelodau o'r pwysigrwydd mwyaf i ni fel Plaid ac i fi fel Arweinydd. Wnaethon ni ymateb a gweithredu yn gyflym wrth ymateb i'r adroddiadau sydd wedi bod yn y cyfryngau, a dyn ni wedi cynnig un staff gefnogaeth briodol sydd angen arnyn nhw, a hefyd ystod o lwybrau ac o ffora lle gallen nhw rannu a'u profiadau yn gyfrinachol. I ni yn ymrwymedig bod y Blaid yn arddel yr gwerthoedd gorau, ac os ydy yr ymarferiad yma yn adnabod pethau mae rhaid i ni fynd i'r afel gyda nhw, neu pethau mae rhaid i ni wella, mi fyddwn ni yn bendant yn gwneud hynny. Fel dwi wedi gweud eisoes, dwi ddim yn bosib ac i fi gweud mwy ynglyn ag unrhyw achos unigol ar y pwynt yma. Am resymau fydd yn ddealladwy. Dwi ddim ag manylion yr ymchwiliadau hynny, ac hynny am resymau priodol. Ond dwi am ddweud hyn, wrth gwrs, fel Plaid, dyn ni'n cymryd pob honiad, pob concern sy'n cael ei godi, pob pryder o ddifri, ac i ni'n gweithredu fel Plaid ar y sail os oes yna dystiolaeth o gam ymddwyn ar ôl fel canlyniad proses o ymchwiliad, byddwn ni yn sicr yn ymateb yn briodol ac yn delio gyda hynny, ac yn unol gyda'n prosesau disgyblaethol. Mi fydd yna amser lle bydd modd ymateb yn llawnach i'r materion yma, ond am y resymau dwi eisiau wedi rannu, dyma'r cwbl dwi'n medru dweud heddiw.
Well, when I was signing off the content of the annual report alongside the leader of Plaid Cymru, the thing that struck me most about it was the sheer volume of hard work that lies behind it, because it is the product of absolutely every week meetings between ministers in the Welsh Government, the designated members, the special advisors who help us to find the solutions that you see delivered in the report. I meet with the leader of Plaid Cymru almost every week to deal with different matters that arise through the development of the policies and the practical actions that lie behind it. And that has been the focus of the way in which we have worked together. It has been on the content of the agreement, the practical things that need to happen to make that difference, and the matters that lie beyond it really haven't intruded on those discussions at all. So pan oedd yn edrych ar y cynnwys o'r adroddiad blaenyddol, beth oedd yn taro fi oedd sut gymaint o gwaith galed sy'n tu ôl cynnwys yr adroddiad. Mae'r aelodau'r cabinet fi ac pobl sy'n ran o'r proses ar ochr Plaid Cymru yn dy gilydd bob wythnos yn trafod pethau, yn fanwl i edrych da'r gilydd ar polisïau, sut allwn ni roi pethau ar waith. A mae hwnna'n mynd ymlaen yn y cyfarfodydd dwi'n cael gyda Adam Price fel Arweinydd Plaid Cymru hefyd. A'r dyna beth ni'n ganolbwyntio arno. Cynnwys yr cytundeb a sut allwn ni wneud wahaniaeth yma yng Nghymru. A pethau tu fas o'r cytundeb, mae hwnna ddim wedi cael effaith ar y gwaith ni'n wedi wneud dy gilydd o gwbl. Diolch, Frist. Thank you. I'm going to go to Katie Fenton from ITV Wales, who's on the screen.
Thank you. Good morning. You've had a disagreement this week over the idea of Wales-specific COVID inquiry. To both of you, is that the sort of disagreement that could knock your cooperation agreement? And to Adam Price, would holding such an inquiry be something you'd want to see if you renew the partnership after 2024?
Well, just to rehearse the origins of the cooperation agreement, we made a very deliberate decision that what we would do would be to identify a very particular number of specific areas on which we would agree, and then we would take those forward together, and we're both committed to doing those things in cooperation in the way we've described today. Everything else that lies beyond it is politics as usual, in which my party and Adam's party are free to take our different views, to debate them robustly as we do. And the fact that there are things that we don't agree on does not make any difference to the things which we were able to agree on and put into the cooperation agreement. That's how we deliberately designed our relationship to work. I think we've managed to do that very successfully. And the inquiry issue is one on which we have different views, but there are many others. And that does not intrude on our ability to work together, where we were able, through months of detailed negotiation, to come to an agreement of the sort we've been describing this morning.
Yes, if I could answer your questions, Katie, as well. The question of a Wales-specific COVID inquiry is one where there is honest disagreement between us as parties. And it is, as the First Minister said, clearly outside of the cooperation agreement. And in areas which are outside of the agreement, of course, we are free to disagree. And indeed, we had a debate this week where we debated the merits of following a different route through having a Senedd special purpose committee set up as some means of achieving the intent of a Wales-specific inquiry. I know that the First Minister said that the government is now going to produce its proposals, and we look forward to engaging as constructively with those. But our position has always been and remains that the best solution would be for us in Wales to hold a Wales-specific inquiry so that we can learn the lessons as quickly as possible, because the likelihood is that at some point we are going to be facing a similar another pandemic at some point. We can't predict when, can't we? We need to learn those lessons, yes, at the UK level, but we think there is there is an important need for a Wales-specific inquiry. That'll remain our position now. If there hasn't been a Wales-specific inquiry by 2024, that will be our position then as well. But we would like it to happen sooner.
Thank you. And I'd like to turn to the nurses' strike and, as of yesterday, ambulance strike. First Minister, your critics accuse you of hiding behind questions about UK government funding. What do you say to them? And Mr. Price, do you agree with the First Minister that his hands are tied when it comes to public sector pay?
Well, let me just be clear again about the position. The Barnett formula means that the money that comes to Wales, 80% of it, is determined by decisions of English ministers about English priorities. And that certainly means that the money that comes to us to cover public sector pay awards is determined by the decisions that are made by English ministers in their context. If they settle for 4%, we get 4%. If they settle for 5%, we get 5%. There is no more money that comes to Wales other than the money that comes through the formula in that way. Now, there is a choice to be made, which is that you could take money from other places to pay people more. We have looked very carefully at all of that. The money we have to sustain our health service, our education service, our social care services, the housing services, all the things that people rely on and make a difference in people's lives, are squeezed already by over a decade of austerity. We could pay a smaller number of people more, but that is what the choice would be. There is no money in the Welsh budget to go beyond what we have been able to offer as a consequence of recommendations of independent pay review bodies and the decisions made on funding them. So it is not hiding behind anything. It is simply a reflection of the reality of the way in which the Welsh Government is funded. But those are the very pernicious choices that we face. Our feeling is we cannot rob our public services in order to move money into pay awards which are not being funded by the UK government at a level which we believe they should be funded. Should make that clear. We believe that our public sector workers ought to be paid properly. We're just not in a position to do that unilaterally, given the way our budgets are constructed.
Well, I'll reiterate our public position that we believe it is important to improve on the current pay offers that have been offered to our public service workers in the NHS and also in education. We think that the pay offers that are significantly below inflation at the current time will have a long-term, as well as having a very direct, immediate impact on those workers and their families at a very difficult time for everyone in the cost of living crisis. They will have a long-term impact on morale, on recruitment and retention, and ultimately we will all suffer as a result of the deterioration which will happen in our public services. And so we think that every lever, every tool should be utilised in order to as best we can in Wales, given the very, admittedly, very, very difficult financial context that the Welsh Government is created for the Welsh Government by the intransigence and short-termism at Westminster. We still believe that the Welsh Government can do more, and as indeed the Scottish Government has been able to do, though admittedly I think the First Minister is right to say that there are always trade-offs, and these trade-offs are not easy. But we believe that we would want to see improved pay offers offered to public service workers, and we have repeatedly suggested, in terms of their impact on next year, because obviously there is always a read across. An improved pay offer this year has to be carried into next year. It has implications over further years. But one of the tools available to us, of course, is the use of income tax powers, and we've been absolutely clear that we think that those powers need to be actively explored in this context. But all of this, of course, is outside of the cooperation agreement, and that is why we are free to have a reasonable and respectful disagreement and debate, and we continue to engage with the Welsh Government on these matters, in the hope that there will be some movement in the direction of those workers that are on strike and those that are likely to join them in the next few weeks.
Diolch Adam. Back to the room and to Clebod of Bauer Media.
Thank you. So the needs of the Welsh people 12 months ago have changed from now. We now have the cost of living crisis, which no one could have predicted 12 months ago. Over the next 12 months, have your ambitions of this COP agreement changed to help people across Wales?
Well, great. Thanks for the question, Claire. And the cost of living crisis and its impact upon people at the length and breadth of Wales and communities, and indeed on the public services, is right at the forefront of our minds. And I think I can say that jointly with the First Minister. And clearly, as I've already said, many of the elements of the cooperation agreement are of direct relevance to people that are struggling to pay their bills at the moment. Thinking about particularly the expansion of universal free school meals through all primary age children, and that has had already a massive impact on so many families at the breadth of Wales, and the fact that we've been able to do that at pace, given the very, very challenging circumstances, given everything else that is the backdrop to this, I think is huge credit to all of those involved. I mean, it's been nothing less than a national mission. And if you speak to people working in catering services in schools, if you speak to teachers and head teachers, etc., and teaching assistants, all of them who have had a role and feel part of this, you can see that they understand how important it has been to deliver it at pace. And similarly with those other elements as well, on the housing affordability crisis, with the pressure that we are seeing in so many communities in different ways across Wales, the fact that we've been able to implement these policies and will continue working on the next stage, I think shows that we realise that in the context of the cost of living crisis, now is not a time to let up. Now is the time to accelerate as fast and as far as we can, delivering on these key commitments that make such a difference to so many families who are struggling at the moment.
Well, just echo what Adam has said. The things we've managed to achieve in the first year of a cooperation agreement include a whole series of things that have a direct impact upon people's ability to manage during the cost of living crisis. The free school meals that Adam has drawn attention to, the expansion of the childcare offer. We know the costs of childcare are often an enormous barrier for families wanting to get into work and employment, which is why we've extended it to people who are on the cusp of employment, as well as expanding it to 2-year-olds. And there's more to come. It's a 3-year agreement. It's inevitable that some things happen in the first year and some things will happen later on in the agreement. We're committed to reform of the council tax in Wales, a genuinely regressive tax, where there are measures we think we can take together to make it a less regressive tax, and therefore to help those people for whom the impact of the council tax is greatest and eats into the money they have for other purposes. So not only are there things that we've done already, but there's more to come, and it's very much in that cost of living space.
And the Welsh Conservatives have called this co-op agreement nothing more than a vanity project, saying you're not focusing on things that matter. Focusing on the NHS in Wales is a key example of that. What would your response be to that? And for you, Adam, they've also said that being in this agreement, you've abdicated your role as genuine opposition in the Senedd. What do you say to that?
Well, they would say that anyway, wouldn't they? I mean, I think what we've been able to demonstrate is that we have taken the mandate that we received from the people of Wales at the election in 2021, and actually we've made a difference to people's lives. I mean, politics ultimately is about leaving society better than when you found it. It's actually acting on behalf of people that are struggling, as we've described, rather than just performing politics. It's not meant to be just a debating society, is it? It's meant to be actually making a practical difference to people's lives. So how is it a vanity project? I've seen the reference to navel gazing. The kind of things that we're talking about this morning, the things we've achieved just in these last 12 months have made a huge, real difference to people right across the length and breadth of Wales. And, with the greatest of respect to the Conservative group in the Senedd, this is what the Senedd was created to do, is actually to make a difference. And even, yes, parties who disagree in some areas, and we've rehearsed plenty of them today, and we've been honest about that, and it hasn't prevented us from engaging as part of the ordinary engagement of politics where we disagree. We do that. But that doesn't mean that you can't identify areas of common ground where working together you could make a huge difference to the people of Wales. And I'm proud that we take that approach to politics. And I think, when you speak to people, actually, that's what they want to see. Why don't you all work together? Why don't you work together and get things done? That's what people want from their politicians, not the sort of Yaboo Westminster kind of theatre of politics. They want practical, progressive differences in their lives. And that's what we're delivering through the cooperation agreement.
Well, can there be anything more miserable in political life than being a Welsh Conservative? To have turned your back on any prospect of developing policies in a relationship with the Welsh people that means you might one day find yourself elected to government, and instead confined always just to criticising what other people do. So my party has had the enormous privilege of winning elections here in Wales and having the opportunity to do the things that you want to do. I so much agree with Adam. The only purpose that I've ever thought of being in politics is to be able to put into practice the things that you believe can make a difference to people who live here in Wales. And that's what the cooperation agreement is about. Where we are able to agree, it allows two parties to bring that motivation together in practical action. And that's what we try to do in everything that you see in this report. And I think you've heard already this morning a whole series of areas where we don't agree and where we have a respectful but robust ability to rehearse the reasons why we come to different conclusions. So I think the cooperation agreement enables us, as Adam says, to do what people ask us to do, which is to work together wherever we can, but not to stand back from having a debate about things where there are differences of view between us. Claire, thank you very much. So a special welcome today on the screen this time to David Nicholson, joining us for the first time from the Morning Star.
Good morning, and thank you. Yeah, no, it's a good thing for the newspaper industry in Wales, which is having a very bad time at the moment. And so I have one question for you both, and it's on the budget really for the Shadow Broadcasting Authority. We know in Wales the newspaper industry is particularly weak. It's been weakened in recent months by the closure of the Corgi Welsh News Agency, and a month or so before that by the closure of the National. Now the cooperation agreement sets out a budget of some £1 million to look at setting up a shadow broadcast authority, which is in the gift of the Westminster government. Would you both, in the light of the huge rise in newspaper print costs and all the other costs facing the Welsh media, look at shifting some of that budget into an area in newspapers where you actually can have where you do have the powers to make a difference?
Well, can I just say, David, great news about your appointment with the Morning Star, and it's I think any addition to the plurality of our media in Wales, I think, is very, very welcome indeed, and that really is at the core of this commitment in our cooperation agreement, because actually media, broadcasting, journalism, including newspapers, are a vital part of our democratic infrastructure. And we need to invest in our democratic infrastructure. If people, you cannot have democracy without an informed citizenry. It is an absolutely core part of our democratic structure. And so that's why we have given it due prominence in the cooperation agreement. We look forward to the report and advice that we will receive from the expert panel in this area, and we'll consider the recommendations that they make to us, and we'll respond subsequently to that.
And in the meantime, it doesn't mean that we aren't investing money directly in the future of Welsh journalism. It's a tricky area. I think it needs careful thinking through as we try to. Government money into journalism, there's a line there somewhere that you need to be on the right side of. But throughout the pandemic and since, we do provide funds to help with hyperlocal journalism and to create the infrastructure in which there is a vibrant future for journalism here in Wales. There is a genuine democratic interest in making sure that that happens without ever wanting to be in a position where it looks as though government money is in any way influencing the job that journalists do. Thank you, David. I think we go back into the room in that case, and to Dan Bevan.
Brenda, Prif, Weinidog, thank you very much. Can I start by asking yourself a question? And if I could get the answer in Welsh and English, I'd be very grateful. You initially wanted an inquiry in Westminster to visit Wales, to have elements in Welsh. That doesn't look like it's going to happen. You still didn't want the inquiry. Well, we've heard from the chair that we are not going to have quite as fully scrutinised elements as would have wanted. That has not changed your mind either. Now your party in the Senedd has voted down a committee to fill the gaps. It does bear the question, what have you got to hide?
Well, first of all, Dan, I don't think you're right on the first thing that you said. If you look at the website of the inquiry, it's been very careful to make sure that the material is available in Welsh as well as English. And the very first visit that the chair of the committee made outside London was to come here to Wales. So I think there is good direct evidence of the determination of the inquiry to pay full regard to Wales and to make sure that those people in Wales who look to that inquiry to give them answers to their questions, that the committee will operate in a way that gives them confidence about that. It is much better that the chair of the inquiry speaks directly for herself, but I think that some of what she said has been over-interpreted. I think she was making a much simpler point that no inquiry into anything can give a guarantee that it will pursue every single question put to it and hear from every single person that might want to give oral evidence to it. I don't think she was making points more than that. As to what happened in the Senedd yesterday, I explained that the government was prepared to accept the argument that if the committee doesn't manage to explore all the issues that are important to us in Wales and isn't able to offer answers to the questions that people will have, that at that point there would be a case for a special purpose committee to fill in any gaps. The problem is we cannot possibly come to that conclusion when the committee hasn't even begun its work, let alone report it. How would you know what those gaps were? How would you know what answers have not been provided at this point? So what I want to do is to think carefully about how you can identify whether there is work that a special purpose committee might do, and then to be able to make that work happen when we know where those gaps would be and where we know where those lessons would need to be drawn. Didn't feel that the proposition yesterday was able to answer those questions fully. The government will bring forward a proposition of our own when we have had that opportunity to think it through properly, taking into account the things that were said in the debate yesterday. Wel, jyst i ddweud, dwi'n meddwl mae'r ymchwil ac cadeirydd yr ymchwiliad, maen nhw yn mynd ati mewn ffordd sy'n gallu roi hyder i bobl yng Nghymru. Maen nhw yn ymwybodol am pethau sy'n pwysig i ni yma yng Nghymru ac i mynd at y gwaith mewn ffordd ble mae pobl yma yng Nghymru yn gallu defnyddio'r pwyllgor i creu ymatebion i'r pethau sy'n pwysig i ni yma yng Nghymru. Ddoe ar llawr y cynulliad wedais i. os bydd bwlchau yn codi yn y gwaith, mae Baroness Hallett yn arwain, os mae hwnna'n digwydd, ni'n fodlon i cefnogi'r pwyllgor arbennig i mynd ar ôl y bwlchau sydd wedi dod ymlaen. Ar hyn o bryd, am fy marn ni, mae'n amhosibl i bod yn glir os bydd bwlchau a ble bydd bwlchau, a ble bydd y wersi ni ddim wedi cael y cyfle i ddysgu. So, wedais i ar llawr y Senedd, bydd y Llywodraeth yn mynd i dod yn ôl gyda'r awgrymiadau ni'n mynd i gweithio'n galed i feddwl am y ffordd gorau ymlaen ac allwn ni roi ar amgrymiadau na o flaen y Senedd i cael y ddadl ar beth bydd y ffordd ymarferol i'r unrhyw bwyllgor y Senedd wneud y gwaith oedd y pobl yn ofyn amdano ddoe, sef i llenwi unrhyw bwlchau. Wel, y peth gyntaf yw i feddwl am sut allwn ni gwybod ble bydd y bwlchau yna yn codi. Dyna beth dwi eisiau feddwl amdano.
Diolch, thank you. Sorry, Adam, did you have anything to add?
We obviously reiterate again that our clear and consistent position is that the best solution would be and still is holding a Wales-specific COVID inquiry. The motion jointly tabled by ourselves and the Conservative group in the Senedd was an attempt to find a compromise, I think. We look forward, as I said, to engaging constructively with the government in their response to this proposal. I'm wondering whether part of the issue is timing, because, which I mean, the First Minister has alluded to this in relation to their analysis, but waiting right until the end, till the final report, does risk, I think, losing some of the currency of information. There are issues in terms of institutional memory. And how do we preserve those over this longer timescale? And one potential approach, given that the inquiry itself is taking a phased approach to different aspects of its inquiry, as to whether gaps can be identified not at the end of the process, but whether we could do that gap identification as the inquiry itself goes through those different phases, which would allow us to have full sight of what the inquiry has covered, at least, while not waiting right until the end for us to begin our complementary inquiry in Wales. So I'll leave that there, and we're happy to have any constructive discussion with the Welsh Government on this matter.
Thank you, appreciate that. And First Minister, you've come back from Qatar now, been back in Wales for about a week. Have you got a rough idea of how much that trip might have cost to the taxpayer? And how can you ensure that it is going to be value for money? And for yourself, Mr. Price, on this question, you were very vocal before the First Minister flew out there regarding the World Cup. I wonder if your opinions may have changed now that the First Minister's returned from his trip and you've been able to see what he's been doing while he was out there.
Well, I don't have the figures immediately to hand, but I'm confident that they will be significantly less. We've counted everything that the Welsh Government has done. It will cost us less than, for example, the installation that the UK government provided to represent the United Kingdom at the World Cup. We can give you the figures as soon as they are finally tabulated. The return on the investment, you won't see it immediately. You never do on these sort of things. I previously gave the example when I went to the Rugby World Cup. There was a delegation of businesses alongside me when I made that visit. It's months later that you find out whether or not the contacts that have been made turn into actual contracts and things. And we do that every time. Every time we have a mission of that sort, we track it over 3 months, over 6 months and beyond, and are able to always, I think, demonstrate that the investment that we make in supporting Welsh businesses in that way pays off many times. And I am sure that the investment we made, which was not confined to football, but had cultural aspects to it, economic aspects to it, as well as being there to speak up for the values that matter to us here in Wales and to be part of that ongoing debate that was certainly very prominent in the whole time that I was in Qatar. The investment that we will have provided has enabled us to advance Welsh interests on a stage where Wales was in the living rooms of 5 billion households right across the world. And you certainly can't pay for that in conventional advertising and other spend. Oh, yeah, well, wrth gwrs, yr arian ni wedi buddsoddi I cefnogi bobl o'r Llywodraeth i fynd I Qatar. Ni'n gallu cyhoeddi faint ni wedi wario, a dwi'n hyderus. Dwi'n hyderus fel ni'n neud pethau fel hyn bob tro. A'r arian ni'n wedi buddsoddi, ni'n mynd I cael yr arian na nôl tro ar ôl tro, nid just yn y maes pêl-droed wrth cwrs, ond popeth arall oeddwn ni'n neud pan oeddwn ni'n draw yn Qatar. Ges I y cyfle I mynd i'r ymgieddfa hetifeddiaeth Mwslamiaid ac I creu perthynas rhwngddo nhw ac yr amgueddfa genedlaethol yma yng Nghymru. Dwi'n edrych ymlaen I croesawu menywod, grŵp o menywod ifanc sy'n gweithio yn y maes yna yn Qatar nôl yma I Gymru yn yr haf flwyddyn nesaf. Ac oeddwn ni'n gallu siarad mwy na maes hynny hefyd, wrth cwrs, yn y maes economaidd. Y pwrpas I fynd I Qatar oedd I cefnogi'r y tîm Gymru, I cefnogi enw Gymru. Enw Cymru oedd trwy'r byd I gyd, trwy mynd ar llwyfan y cwpan y byd. A dwi'n hyderus bydd hwnna yn mynd I fod yn werth I Gymru dros y blynyddoedd sydd I ddod.
Yeah, I think that the best ambassadors for Wales of all at this World Cup, and I'm sure the First Minister wouldn't disagree with this, were the fans, weren't they? I mean, they've much as Iceland supporters have won the hearts at other competitions. I think if there was a competition for the best anthem, I think we'd win it. But also the way in which the Welsh fans have supported their team, the enthusiasm, the hwyl, maybe that has entered the world lexicon in the same way that crack as in the context of the Irish. They've done us proud, haven't they? And the Football Association and everything leading up and the way they've encapsulated who we are as a nation and who we want to be. And I think they have lifted our spirits, but I think they've done a bit to lift spirits more generally as well. I think I accept that it was a difficult decision, and so I wouldn't criticise the First Minister, but I think it was the wrong decision to go myself personally. I can understand the rationale. And it's a difficult judgment because that opportunity was important to grasp, to project Wales. Was it necessary for ministers to be there? I'm not convinced, and I think we should have made a important symbolic stance by not being there and sending a powerful message in terms of our values in that way. Particularly, I think, with the hardening of rhetoric that happened, and I know First Minister and others and the Economy Minister have criticised some of the silence of FIFA at various times, and then worse than the silence, the absolutely horrendous remarks made by the FIFA president on the cusp of the beginning of the game, and then the appalling scenes and the way in which LGBTQ+ supporters and their allies were treated in relation to rainbow bucket hats, etc. Given all of that, I think it would have been better for us not to have had ministers there representing us in an official capacity. But I understand that, you know, there are difficult judgment calls that individuals had to make. But if we boycotted the Iran game and showed that we did believe that actually boycotts in relation to human rights have an important, by ministers, have an important symbolic power, then I don't really understand why that boycott was not actually general across all three games.
Diolch, Dan. Back to the screen, and welcome back to Tom Magna.
Thank you very much indeed, First Minister. I'm sorry about the music behind me. I'm at a location not of my choosing. Can I just ask you, obviously, you're celebrating, that's the right word, a year of the cooperation agreements. Where do unpaid carers stand in all this? Because we're all familiar with the figure that 96% of care in Wales is provided by unpaid carers. They describe it to me as a dilution of compassion and commitment these days from, say, the start of the pandemic. Where is the common ground? What are the priorities? What action will be seen in the next year? To both of you, please.
Yeah. Well, I don't think celebration is a bad word, Tom, because I think there is a lot to be proud of in what we've been able to do together over the last year. Carers' responsibilities remain outside the main part of the agreement, but I don't think there would not be common ground between us on the key policies that we would like to be able to take forward. So the extra investment in respite care would be shared, I think, between us. The way in which we have been able to provide additional funding for some carers, encouraging carers to be registered for that purpose as part of our cost of living funds. So wanting to do more to support unpaid carers would be common ground between us.
Yes, and just to add to that, Tom, and I know that you and I are still due to have a longer conversation, and look forward to that, where we can touch on some of these issues in greater depth. But yes, I mean, we share the sense of importance that we need to place an increased importance on the role of unpaid carers, and we need to pursue all the avenues in which are available to us in order to improve on the current situation. In the context that specifically, as the First Minister said, is outside of the cooperation agreement, but obviously the National Care Service is a very, very important element within the agreement. In fact, I would venture to say that probably in terms of the longer-term impact of the cooperation agreement, it is possibly one of the most important elements of all, because it will have the National Care Service created based on the principles of parity between the NHS and the National Care Service in terms of the workforce, but also a care service based on the NHS principle of being free at the point of need. That has the potential to have a transformative impact across generations. And I think one of the questions for us that you raised, Tom, quite rightly, is what is the impact of a national care service on unpaid carers? And there are interesting examples across Europe as to how progressive professional care systems, if I can put it in those terms, work positively and in a complementary way, working with and recognizing the absolutely central role of unpaid carers in a more substantive and substantial way than we have been able to hitherto. And certainly we'd be very, very interested in having a conversation with you as to how that National Care Service could improve the lot of unpaid carers that we rely on so much as a society.
Thank you for that. Can I just pick up on this theme of the National Care Service? Forgive me for saying this, but haven't you already got a National Care Service with the nearly 400,000 unpaid carers across Wales, with all the skills of being able to juggle work and caring and sleep and trying to get a balance between all of that? They're on duty 365 days a year, 24/7, without any breaks really. So effectively, you've got a National Care Service. Why can't that be moulded into your thinking on that? Again, to both of you.
Well, Tom, I think you heard Adam say that we are very keen to do just that, to make sure that that enormous contribution is moulded into our thinking about a National Care Service. But the unpaid carers are a very, very important element in that, but they're not the only element in that. There are all the things that our care workforce do every day in Wales. We need to capture that, and that isn't on a national basis. As you know, it's distributed amongst the 22 local authorities, and an awful lot of it is provided by private companies as well. So we have the report of the expert group that we set up. There are lots of things in that we are able to build on straight away. There are some elements of it we are having to look at because the landscape has changed even while the expert group were reporting. The UK government has decided not to go ahead with its arrangements for a direct rise in national insurance contributions and funding for social care, and it's decided not to go ahead with the Boris Johnson version of the Dilnot review. Those are pretty fundamental changes in the broader landscape. They do have a direct impact here in Wales. There are aspects of the expert group that we will have to think of in that change context. But there are, alongside those things, some very practical and immediate measures that we're going to be able to draw on as a result of that work. And that will include that interface between unpaid and paid for care.
And I see David Cameron, is it today, saying that there should be a social insurance system for care. It begs the question, well, where were you? Where were you for 6 years when you were in government and you could have made it happen? But to reiterate my earlier point, Tom, I think the interrelationship, the positive interrelationship between a national care service constituted along the lines that I set out earlier, and the role of unpaid carers, I think is a absolutely central question. And there are some interesting examples across the world, in Germany, in Japan, etc., where there has been interesting attempts at complementarity between unpaid carers and the role of unpaid carers, and supporting them and harnessing that, but doing so in a way that recognizes their important role, as you say, Tom, as part of effectively a national care system, which doesn't just include the professional public service, but also, clearly, and I know this from my own family experience that I've talked about previously, relies upon, heroic efforts by many people, the length and breadth of Wales.
Diolch, Tom. Thank you very much. Ac yn ola, heddi ar y sgrin, James Williams, BBC.
Diolch yn fawr i chi. Gair y tebion yma yn Gymraeg ac yn Saesneg hefyd, please. I gadw ymlaen gyda'r syniad yma o system o fel cymdeithasol am ddim, ydych chi dal yn meddwl bod hynny yn bosib o ystyried beth oedd wedi gynnwys yn datganiad yr Hydref am y canolig o ran gwariant cyhoeddus, ac yn wreiddiol, Prif Weinidog, mi oeddech chi'n aros i weld beth oedd syniadau Llywodraeth San Steffan o ran ariannu gofal cymdeithasol, fe wnaethon nhw fynd am cynnydd mewn yswiriant cenedlaethol. Mae hynny wedi mynd erbyn hyn. Os ydyw yn amser nawr, felly i chi ail ystyried o ddifri y syniad o dreth penodol ar gyfer gofal cymdeithasol yma yng Nghymru, fel mae pobl wedi bod yn galw arnoch chi wneud ys sawl blwyddyn.
Wel, diolch yn fawr, James, fel wedais i yn yr ateb ola, i Tom. Mae'r cyd-destun yn wedi newid, achos mae'r penderfyniadau y Llywodraeth yn San Steffan wedi newid hefyd. Dyna pam ni yn mynd nôl i ailfeddwl am rai o'r pethau mae'r pwyllgor arbennig wedi ddweud ato ni, achos mae'r cyd-destun wedi newid yn y ffordd chi'n wedi ddweud. Dwi'n meddwl mae hwnna yn golygu bydd yn pwysig i mynd nôl at y gwaith galed oedd y Llywodraeth a bobl tu fas o'r Llywodraeth wedi wneud yn y tymor diwetha ar y syniadau oedd wedi dod ato ni i weld os mae'n posibl i creu rhywbeth wahanol yma yng Nghymru a system wahanol hefyd. Y challenge bob tro yw y perthynas rhwng be ni'n neud fan hyn yng Nghymru ac y systemau buddaliadau ac yn y blaen sydd dal i fod yn dwylo San Steffan. So, mae'n gymleth, dyna pam oeddwn ni'n wedi wneud y gwaith. Ar ôl y newidiadau, wel pethau mae'n wedi tynnu nôl arno yn San Steffan, bydd rhaid i ni mynd nôl at y gwaith na i weld os allwn ni ffindio'r ffordd ymlaen i ni yma yng Nghymru. So James was asking me about the changes that the UK government has made, or the reversals in many ways, of the policies they had announced for funding social care. And did that mean that we needed here in Wales to go back to some of the ideas that were previously being explored about, for example, a social care levy of our own? And I simply said that the changed context at the UK level does mean that we're looking again at some of the work of the expert group. The relationship between decisions we make in Wales in social care and things that are not devolved remains complicated and challenging. You know, we can do things that would mean people would get more money from the Welsh government and lose money through the benefit system, making, in the end, them no better off, which is why the detailed work has to be done. But I believe myself that the case has strengthened for us going back to that work that was done in the last Senedd term and to see whether it offers us an alternative way of resolving some of these dilemmas in Wales.
Mae dros ddegawd wedi bod o oedi tropedol ar ôl tropedol a dim symud mlaen o gwbl o gyfeiriad San Steffan, ond oes. Wy'n cofio yn fy mlwyddyn ola yn San Steffan, mi'n credu oedd Andy Burnham wedi ceisio cael rhyw fath o consensus ar draws y pleidiau i gyd gan gydnabod. Mae hwn yn un o'r pethau. Mae rhaid i ni ddatrys ar y cyd, a mae rhaid i ni gael datrysiad hir dymor. Oedd y ceidwadwyr wedi gwrthod hynny, ond wedyn ni wnaethon nhw cael yr adolygiad dilnot, a wedyn ni, wrth gwrs, maen nhw wedi gwrthod hynny, a nawr wedi wneud tropedol ar y lefi arfaethedig fel oedd y Prif Weinidog wedi gweud, a hefyd ar ei fersiwn nhw o'r cap ar gostau. Felly dim symud mlaen o gwbl. Deddf, dweud y gwir, wedi pasio yn y cyfamser, gyda rai o ran y sector gofal, gyda rai yn Lloegr, gyda rai nodau digon clodwiw, ond dim adnoddau, wrth gwrs, mwyn cyrraedd at y nodau hynny, felly dyn ni dal yn yr un man. Felly allwn ni ddim dibynnu ar San Steffan, yn un ddigon clir. Felly mae rhaid i ni ofyn ein hunain, wel beth i ni yn gorfod wneud yn hunain yn y gwagle yma, a dwi yn cytuno, oherwydd bod y cyd-destun wedi newid, yn ni ddiolchgar iawn am gwaith y grŵp arbenigol, ond bydd rhaid i ni ddychwelyd nawr at y gwaith hynny, oherwydd bod y cyd-destun wedi newid, ond hefyd dychwelyd at y gwaith blaenorol gan yr athro Jerry Holtham i weld ydy hynny nawr yn cynnig y ffordd ymlaen i ni tra bod San Steffan o hyd ac o hyd yn troi mewn cylchoedd. And yes, so we've basically had Westminster over more than a decade, just continually moving in circles, U-turn after U-turn, no progress. The health and care levy is the latest of those U-turns. There was a famous U-turn during an election campaign, as I seem to recall, when Theresa May was Prime Minister as well. So, but there's been no progress. And I think what I think we have to conclude is that if we wait for Westminster to come up with a sustainable solution to their social care challenges, to the crisis in social care there, then we will be waiting possibly forever. I think that we do now need to obviously re-examine some of the excellent work done as part of this agreement by the expert panel, but whether the context has clearly changed. But I think we do need to revisit some of the ideas which were proposed in an earlier report at earlier stages by Professor Holtham, to see whether that, in conjunction with some of the ideas that the expert panel referred to, is the way forward on a sustainable basis for the kind of national care service that we want to create as we look to produce our implementation plan by the end of next year.
A wedyn, chi eisiau wedi bod yn trafod cyd-destun ariannol, mae'r polisïau sydd yn rhan o'r cynllun cydweithredu yma wedi cael ei gwarchod i cyllideb yn wedi cael ei gwarchod. Mae'n golygu fydd yna bwysau ar bethau eraill. Mae'n gyllideb drafft yn dod o fewn o'r wythnosau nesaf ar gyfer ariannol flwyddyn nesaf. Chi, Adam Price, wedi bod yn galw am sawl wythnos ar y syniad yma o dreth solidariaeth, cynnydd mewn yn y dreth incwm mwyn llenwi rhai o'r bylchau hynny, golygu falle fydd yna fwy o arian ar gyfer gweithwyr yn y sector gyhoeddus ac yn y blaen. Ym mis Hydref, fe nathoch chi, eich grŵp chi yn y Senedd, cefnogi'r syniad o gynnydd o 4 ceiniog yn y gyfradd uwch a 5 ceiniog yn y gyfradd ychwanegol. Beth yw safbwynt Plaid Cymru ar hyn o bryd o ran yn benodol beth fydd ddylai ddigwydd gyda y dreth incwm? Ac wedyn ni Mark Drakeford, fe ddwedwch chi ar y pryd bod chi'n meddwl bod y syniad yna o ddefnyddio trethu incwm ar gyfer hynny sy'n ennill fwy arian mwyn llenwi'r bylchau'n pie in the sky. Ydych chi dal yn meddwl hynny? A hefyd yn ôl as gai, fe ddwedwch chi wrth Al Jazeera bod chi yn bwriadu parhau yn y swydd am 5 mlynedd. Mae hynny'n golygu byddech chi'n camu lawr o bosib erbyn diwedd y flwyddyn nesaf, ond ydych chi wir eisiau gorffen y cyfnod yma o'r polisi cydweithredu cyn ystyried eich arweinydd chi? Diolch yn fawr.
Diolch James. Wel, i ni wedi bod yn gyson iawn wrth ymateb i'r crisis costau byw a'r holl pwysau yma hynny yn cynrychioli. Y dylai Llywodraeth Cymru yn tybni archwilio defnyddio'r pwerau treth incwm, o'r pwerau trethiannol, ond y pwerau treth incwm yn benodol. Wneud hynny mewn ffordd priodol, ond a blaengar. Trwy beth i ni wedi galw yn treth solidariaeth neu treth cyd-sefyll, dewiswch chi, ond sydd yn adlewyrchu'r egwyddorion blaengar yma. Ac a dyn ni'n dal i archwilio hynny, fel wedes i mewn cyfaliad i'r BBEC yn ystod y gynadledd. Wrth gwrs, oedden ni eisiau gweld cyn benderfynu fel Plaid o ran union cyfraddau, oedden ni eisiau gweld yr datganiad yr Hydref a gweld effaith hynny ar sefyllfa cyllidol Cymreig. Dyn ni wedi gwneud rhagor o waith yna fe, dyn ni'n barhau i wneud hynny a chael cyngor arbenigol annibynnol. A wy'n cwrdd fori, dyn ni'n cwrdd fel grŵp gyda'r ganolfan llywodraethiant sydd rhyw fath o fersiwn neu yr hyn sy'n cyfateb i Gymru yr IFS o ran yr arbenigwyr yn y maes yma, i edrych ar fodelau gwahanol. Dyna beth i ni wedi bod yn edrych yna fe. Ac sut gall y pwerau yma o'i ddefnyddio'n iawn, o'i ddefnyddio mewn ffordd blaengar, helpu ni wrth i ni wynebu yr pwysau fel gwlad a fel pobl yn ystod y crisis costau byw. So, we've been very, very consistent over many months now as a party that we believe all of the tools and all of the levers available to the Welsh Government need to be used, and need to be explored and need to be used in a progressive way. and that includes the use of the income tax powers available to the Welsh Government in responding to the cost of living crisis that we're facing. And as I said to you, or to the BBC certainly at the conference, then we wanted to see the effect of the autumn statement on Wales's fiscal position. And we've continued to do further detailed work and had independent advice from, amongst other, the Welsh Governance Centre, which we're meeting with tomorrow, actually, to look at different ways in which we could use the income tax powers and the different effects that they would have, and how that could help us in the context of the cost of living crisis. And, you know, we're a socialist party, and we strongly believe that these income tax powers are there for a reason. They're there. We campaigned for them. We argued in favour of them so that they would be there to be used when necessary and to help the people of Wales. And we're in a huge crisis at the moment, and we think it's absolutely the right thing to do to look at, to explore how we could actually introduce what we've called a solidarity tax to protect our public services and to help the people of Wales face the difficulties that we're all facing at this time of the cost of living crisis.
Diolch Adam. Wel, bydd cynllun drafft yn cael ei cyhoeddi wythnos nesa ac ran o'r roi y cynllun drafft o flaen y Senedd yw i ddweud beth ni'n mynd i wneud gyda trethu yn y maes incwm, a bydd rhaid i bobl aros tan hynny i weld beth ni'n mynd i awgrymu. Wedais i dim byd newydd o gwbl i Al Jazeera. Wedais i yr unig peth i wedi ddweud dros blynyddoedd nawr, so does dim newyddion mewn fyna, dwi'n meddwl, ac mae'r cytundeb ddim yn dibynnu ar unigolyn. Cytundeb rhwng dau blaidiau yw e. So, as I've explained many times, the draft budget will be laid next week. We always make our announcements on income tax as part of the draft budget, and people will see what we are proposing when it is published. I said nothing to Al Jazeera that I haven't said for at least 5 years. There's no parlour game politics to be played with what I said, because there's nothing new in it at all. And as far as the cooperation agreement is concerned, it's not an agreement between individuals. It's an agreement between parties. And it's there for the 3-year term for which it's been agreed. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you all very much indeed. The hound are now.